They called me dull, not in a cruel, overt way, no. That would have at least implied they saw me as a threat. Instead, they used quieter words. Words like reliable, stable, predictable. They dressed their dismissal in politeness, like wrapping barbed wire in silk. But no matter how nicely you say it, being invisible in a room full of ambition cuts deep. I was Nancy Everett, 41 years old, administrative assistant at Strathmore Capital for the past 12 years. I wasn't flashy. I didn't clomp around in designer heels or shout over people in meetings. I didn't network at happy hours or post motivational quotes on LinkedIn. I showed up. I did my job, flawlessly, every single time. And for that, I became furniture, functional, unnoticed, at least until they needed something. Hey Nancy, do you remember where the Lawson contract from Q3 2018 is filed? Hey Nancy, can you pull up those archived performance reports from 2 years ago? Hey Nancy, you're amazing with details. Can you double-check this proposal? Yes, and yes. I always said yes. I remembered everything. I kept records. So precise they could be used in court. My brain was a vault, and my desk was a time machine. Past, present, and future all tucked neatly into color-coded folders. But no matter how vital I became, I was still just Nancy. Never the one. Invited to strategy meetings. Never asked what I thought. Never considered for advancement. Then came Emily Reed. Bright, brash, all of 29. She strutted into Strathmore Capital with a portfolio full of confidence and a resume padded with buzzwords. She was the kind of person who wore ambition like a perfume, heavy and cloying. I was assigned to train her, of course. Me, the vault of knowledge. Me, the safe pair of hands. I taught her everything. How to navigate our system, how to speak to the partners, which files could make or break a deal. She was polite at first, eager, grateful. I almost liked her, until she took credit for my work. Not once, not twice, but every time. She started presenting reports I'd prepared, word for word, as if she'd written them. She regurgitated my insights in meetings, claiming them as her own. And because she said it all with sparkly eyes and a megawatt smile, they believed her. Emily has such a sharp analytical mind, they said. Emily's a rising star, they whispered. And I sat there, watching my ideas sprout wings and fly out of someone else's mouth. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning. Emily had been promoted to Associate Director of Operations, a title so vague it might as well have been invented on the spot. She walked into the break room with a latte and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Nancy, you've always been so helpful. I hope you don't mind showing the new admin the ropes." New admin? That's what I was now. A trainer, a stepping stone. She grinned as she walked away, like it was a compliment. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Precision. You see, they thought I was dull. But they forgot that dull things, paper clips, rubber bands, safety pins, hold everything together. They underestimated the quiet ones, the watchers, the ones who remember. I started keeping copies of everything, emails, drafts, edits, meeting notes, every instance where Emily had taken something I'd created and passed it off as her own. Every internal document with metadata, every file with a digital fingerprint. I didn't confront her. I didn't alert HR. That would have tipped my hand too early. Instead, I played along. Sure, Emily, I'll update that spreadsheet. Course, Emily, I'll draft that email. Yes, Emily, I'll prep the data for the partners' meeting. And while she took bows, I quietly built my case. I started coming in earlier and leaving later. I scanned documents no one would ever think to check. I made backups of my backups. I organized my findings into a private digital archive, one she didn't know existed, one that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, what she'd done. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was preparing for an opportunity, because I knew something about Strathmore Capital that Emily didn't. The higher you climb, the more visibility you attract. One misstep, one bad quarter, one wrong signature, and the spotlight would shift. And when it did, I'd be ready. So I waited, and I smiled, and I kept being dull, Because the best part about being invisible is that no one sees you coming. Loyalty is a strange thing. It begins as a choice, then it becomes a habit, and eventually it turns into a prison you build with your own hands, brick by brick, favor by favor. For 12 years, I gave that company everything. I never missed a deadline. Never let a file go missing. Never once took credit for someone else's work. And in return, I got a certificate of appreciation on my 10-year anniversary and a cupcake from the office manager. I didn't complain. I didn't expect parades or bonuses, but I did expect something human. Recognition, respect. A seat at the table I helped set every day. Instead, they gave that seat to Emily. After her promotion, things changed fast. She wasn't just my colleague anymore, she was my superior. My student had become my manager, and worse, she made sure everyone remembered that fact. She stopped asking politely and started delegating. Nancy, I need the McAllister reports before noon. Nancy, can you rewrite this deck to make it sound more strategic? Nancy, be a dear and order lunch for the team meeting. Make sure it's vegan and gluten-free this time. Be a dear. It stung more than any insult ever could. I took the orders. I smiled through clenched teeth. Because loyalty, real loyalty, doesn't bend with the wind. Or at least that's what I told myself. Until the moment I realized I was being loyal to people who wouldn't blink if I disappeared. The first real crack appeared during a quarterly financial review. Emily had presented a report, one that looked eerily familiar. The formatting, the phrasing, even the footnotes. It was mine. A report I had drafted 3 weeks earlier and saved in the internal system under my folder. I knew every cell, every graph, every data point. She had changed the title page and moved a few sections around, but it was undeniably my work, and she never once mentioned my name. Worse, the partners praised her. Outstanding clarity, Emily. This is exactly what we needed. Great initiative. Sat there in the back of the room, invisible again, holding a notepad I didn't need and fighting the urge to speak. My hands trembled. Not with rage, but with the icy calm that follows a betrayal you saw coming and hoped wouldn't arrive. After the meeting, she turned to me in the hallway and said, "Great work on pulling the data, Nancy. You really set me up for success." Set her up? No. What I had done was build the entire stage, write the script, and hand her the spotlight. All she did was stand there and smile. That night, I stayed late. I didn't even pretend to work. I sat at my desk and stared at the glowing monitor, scrolling through years of documents, emails, meeting notes. I searched for a pattern, not in her theft, but in mine. I had stolen from myself. Year after year, I had handed over my loyalty to people who wouldn't even remember my birthday unless Outlook reminded them. I thought my work ethic would protect me. I thought being irreplaceable would make me respected. But in the corporate world, being irreplaceable only means they'll use you until you break, and then act shocked when you finally do. Emily didn't stop at stealing ideas. A week later, she sent an email to the executive team suggesting a reorganization of roles. It was framed as improving operational efficiency, but I wasn't naive. She wanted to reduce administrative headcount, specifically mine. I was CC'd on the email, not even addressed directly, and when I brought it up to her in person, she smiled that same condescending smile and said, "Oh, Nancy, don't take it personally. It's just business." That was the moment my loyalty died, not with a bang, not even with bitterness, just a quiet, surgical severing of something that had once mattered. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. Because I knew her weakness. She didn't think I was a threat. She saw me as background noise, a harmless fixture in the corner of an office she now thought she owned. And that meant she would never suspect that I, the dull one, had a front row seat to everything. She didn't know I had access to the internal finance systems, that I handled compliance logs, that I sat next to the server admin during lunch, and knew which drives weren't backed up properly. She didn't know I had spent the last 6 months teaching myself metadata recovery, that I had a private archive of every document revision, every draft, every timestamp. She didn't know I had kept copies of her forged approval signatures on supplier contracts that were never reviewed. Or that I knew the consultant she secretly paid under a fake vendor name to help with strategy, a consultant who happened to be her boyfriend. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Not just evidence, irrefutable evidence. I needed the kind of airtight, time-stamped digital trail that would survive even the most expensive corporate lawyer's scrutiny. And so I watched. I waited. And I recorded everything. My loyalty was gone, but my memory was still intact. And Emily, she, was too busy climbing the ladder to notice that the rungs were starting to crack beneath her feet. Some betrayals are loud, explosive, dramatic, unforgettable. Others are quiet, like a single line of ink on the wrong document. It was a Thursday afternoon, unusually quiet on the operations floor. Half the team was off-site for a seminar, and Emily had locked herself in the glass-walled conference room with her new boyfriend consultant, now disguised as an external workflow strategist. They didn't know I had been asked to help coordinate logistics for their vendor payments. They definitely didn't know I had full access to the vendor contract folder they had carelessly mislabeled. That's when I saw it, a signed approval, for a vendor payment, dated 3 days before the board had even reviewed the partnership. A signature from one of the partners who was out of the country at the time, and the signature, not his. I stared at it. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. I just stared, because the font was off by a hairline. The slant wasn't right. And I knew this because I had scanned, filed, and reviewed every single partner signature for years. I could recognize them the way others recognized faces, or voices, or lies. And this was a lie. I opened the file history, tracked the document. Metadata revealed the editor, Emily Reed. 2 hours before the signature appeared, she had uploaded a blank template titled Contract Draft V7. Version 8 had the fake signature. The payment had already been processed. $40,000 to Zerion Consultants LLC, a shell company with a fancy name and no website. I Googled it anyway. Nothing. Just a P.O. box. And the address, registered under a man whose LinkedIn conveniently listed him as freelance consultant, formerly at a boutique firm, and very recently in a relationship with Emily Reed on Facebook. I didn't have time to process the layers of arrogance, because in that moment I realized 2 things. Emily had committed corporate fraud. I was the only one who knew. No one had seen it yet. The board had rubber-stamped the next phase of funding based on her reports. The finance team didn't know the signature was fake. And since I was the one who scanned and filed most of these contracts, it was my word against hers, unless I made it more than just my word. So I acted. I exported the original file versions. I created screen recordings of the file history, the IP access logs, the timestamps. I pulled the partner's travel itinerary from our calendar system to prove he was out of town. Then I backed everything up, twice. One copy went to an encrypted drive. The other to a cloud folder no one could access without a 48-character password. And then I waited. Emily came out of the conference room smiling. She was always smiling when she thought she'd gotten away with something. She stopped at my desk and dropped off a folder. Can you file this? It's time sensitive. That was rich. I looked at the folder. Another vendor form. Another approval sheet. But this time, no signature. She was getting bolder. I didn't answer her. I didn't look up. I just took the folder and said, of course. Because dull little Nancy always said yes. But behind the screen, dull little Nancy had already drafted an anonymous whistleblower report. It was waiting in my drafts folder, just one click away. I thought about sending it. Right then. Right there. But I didn't. Because if I sent it too early, she'd play the victim. She'd cry, say it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. She might even throw her boyfriend under the bus and walk away clean. No. I needed her to bury herself deeper. To get comfortable. To commit just one more forgery. Just one more lie. So when it all collapsed, it wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a reckoning. And I wouldn't just be the witness. I'd be the executioner. People underestimate memory. They think it's about birthdays, phone numbers, grocery lists. They forget it's a weapon, a map, a trap. And mine was flawless. I remembered the exact shade of the hallway carpet when I started at Strathmore, Capital 12 years ago. I remembered which chair in the boardroom creaked when you leaned back. I remembered every policy update, every compliance memo, every contradiction in every email that was ever quietly buried under the next deadline. But more than anything, I remembered people. The way they moved when they lied, the words they used, when they tried to make guilt sound like teamwork. And Emily? She was a walking pattern of betrayal, repetitive, predictable, sloppy, and that made her easy to corner. I didn't go after her directly. That would have tipped her off. No, I went after the weak spots around her, places she thought no one was looking. First, the expense reports. I'd been in charge of processing them for years. I knew the codes, the limits, the gray zones that employees used when they wanted something reimbursed but didn't want questions asked. I flagged 3 of Emily's reports from the last quarter. All of them listed meals with external vendors that coincidentally aligned with Instagram posts from her personal account, posts of her and her boyfriend drinking overpriced wine at rooftop restaurants. She didn't even change the dates. Then, I checked the consultant invoices. Her boyfriend, masquerading as Zirian Consultants LLC, had billed over $100,000 in just 3 months. For what? Strategic insight sessions. I pulled up the meeting room logs. There were none. No records, no bookings, no calendar invites. The sessions never happened. I quietly copied all of it. Duplicates, offline, dated. And then I started planting breadcrumbs. I mentioned to the finance associate during lunch that there seemed to be a strange billing pattern between Emily and one of our vendors. "Oh, really?" he said, barely looking up from his phone. I smiled. "Could just be a coincidence." He shrugged. But 2 days later, I saw him reviewing the expense reports. I hadn't told him what to look for, just enough to get him curious. Next, I spoke to Rachel in compliance. Casual chat. I asked her if she remembered when we updated the vendor authorization protocol. "Was it April or May?" I asked. "May 14th, she said. "Why?" I nodded. Just trying to remember if the new vendor Emily approved was before or after that. Which vendor? I let the silence linger. She started digging that afternoon. You see, when you've been ignored for long enough, people forget how dangerous your silence can be. They forget that someone like me, someone dull, someone reliable, sees everything, remembers everything, and knows exactly where all the cracks in the floor are. By the end of the week, whispers were starting. Nothing concrete, just unease. Emily was still parading around like she ran the place, still barking orders, still forwarding my work and signing her name to it. But there was a tension now. Her emails took longer to get replies. Her requests weren't answered quite as fast. She felt it. I saw it in her eyes, but she didn't know where it was coming from, because I was still smiling, still showing up, still organizing her documents with perfect precision. That's when she made her biggest mistake. A last-minute client presentation had to be pulled together. Big investor, big money, high stakes. Emily needed the data by Friday. She handed me her draft on Thursday evening and said, "You know what to do, Nancy. Clean it up, make it sparkle." I did, but I also added one line, just one, on slide 17. A projected figure for Q3 revenue. Slightly inflated, not enough to raise alarm, just enough to be wrong. Then I saved 2 versions, one for her, one for me. She didn't double-check it. She never did. She printed it out, marched into the boardroom the next day, and delivered her pitch with confidence. It wasn't until Monday that questions started coming in. Where did this Q3 number come from? Why does it not match the finance projections? Who approved this data? Emily froze. She blamed the system. A formatting error. Miscommunication. She even tried to suggest I might have made the mistake, but I had the receipts, the time-stamped file, the version history, the chat log where she wrote, "Looks good, sending as is." I didn't need to defend myself, because this time, I wasn't the only one watching her. The partner she had forged the signature of? He returned from his trip, early. And he didn't like hearing that someone had approved a vendor while he was 6,000 miles away. He especially didn't like that the signature on the document looked like a scan of an old contract, cropped and pasted. By Wednesday, compliance had launched a quiet inquiry. By Friday, the head of internal audit requested to meet with me off the record. I wore beige, no makeup, hair tied up, quiet, unassuming, just like always, and then I opened my folder. Not a single word of anger, no accusations, just documents, proof, cross-reference timelines, emails, reimbursements, vendor inconsistencies, the signature forgery, the personal relationship with the consultant, the mismatched reports. It took me 6 minutes to lay it all out. Then I closed the folder and said, "Of course, none of this is officially my concern. I'm just the admin." The room was silent. He leaned back and said, "You're not just anything, Nancy." No, not anymore. Desperation has a smell. It's not sweat or fear. It's chaos masked as confidence. It's perfume that's too strong, laughter that's too loud, smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. That's what Emily reeked of. She still wore the same. High heels, still barked out orders like she owned the office, but her voice was off-pitch, her timing, off-beat. She had started staying late, locking herself in conference rooms, clutching folders tighter than usual, because something had shifted. The whispers had turned into questions. The questions turned into quiet meetings. And now, people who used to nod and follow were replying to her emails with one-word answers, or none at all. And me? I was still Nancy. Still early to work. Still brewing the coffee. Still updating the filing system no one else understood. Only now, I wasn't being ignored. I was being watched. The head of compliance would linger by my desk for just a beat too. Long. The partner Emily forged a signature for? He greeted me by name now. Even HR started offering polite smiles instead of half-hearted nods. They knew, not everything. Not yet. But they knew enough. And Emily. She knew she was being hunted. She just didn't know by whom. That's the beauty of being underestimated. When the fire starts, no one suspects the one holding the match is the same person they asked to restock paper clips last week. She made her next mistake 2 days later. In a panic, she scheduled a team sync to reestablish control. She tried to paint the recent questions as normal audits, said she'd been asked to provide some extra reports, just to ensure compliance. I watched her as she spoke. Her eyes scanned the room constantly, trying to read faces, to find allies. But there were none. Just coworkers giving her the polite, performative attention people give someone they're ready to let go. Then she called on me. "Nancy, can you give everyone a quick update on where we stand with the vendor contract archives?" The room turned, smiled. Of course. I stood up, slowly, walked to the projector, plugged in a flash drive I'd prepared the night before. Not with evidence, not with proof, with a spreadsheet. It was simple, clean, nothing controversial. Just a tidy breakdown of vendor activity over the last year, color-coded by department. But buried in row 47 in faint gray text was a single entry. Zerion Consultants, LLC, no verification of work sessions, paid in full, signed by ER. Pre-approval date discrepancy. I didn't explain it. I didn't emphasize it. I didn't even look at her. I just clicked through the slides like it was any other report. But the room had gone still. Everyone saw it. Everyone knew. And Emily? Her voice cracked when she thanked me. She knew too. That evening, I walked past her office and saw her pacing, alone. A phone in her hand, but no one answering. Her face pale, her hands shaking. The next morning, she arrived late, hair undone, no makeup. Wearing flats. It was over, even if she hadn't admitted it yet. Internal Audit sent out a notice the following week. An internal review of vendor procurement processes is underway. If you've received communication regarding your department, please respond promptly. They didn't say her name. They didn't have to. 3 days later, she sent a company-wide email announcing her resignation due to personal reasons. No goodbye lunch, no flowers, just silence. The office felt lighter that day. Not joyful, just released. I waited until the afternoon to walk into HR. I placed a sealed envelope on the desk, my formal report. Inside was everything, all the documents, all the proof, all the lies. The head of HR opened it, flipped through a few pages, and looked up at me. "You could have sent this weeks ago." I nodded. I could have. Why wait? I met his eyes, calm, cold, controlled, because I wanted them to see her fall on her own. I wanted them to understand the weight of what they allowed. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in 12 years, I was offered a chair in that room, not as an admin, but as something else, something they hadn't seen coming. The funny thing about silence? People confuse it with weakness. They think that if you don't fight back loudly, you must not know how to fight at all. That if you're calm, you must be incapable of anger. But silence isn't weakness. It's a loaded gun with the safety still on, and I had kept mine aimed for a long time. After Emily's resignation, the office buzzed with theories. Some said burnout. Some whispered about a breakup. A few suspected scandal but had no proof. Management never confirmed anything, of course. They wanted it buried. But I had other plans. I didn't want revenge that roared. I wanted acknowledgement. So, when the regional director invited me to a closed-door meeting to discuss the future of the operations team, I knew my moment had come. He started with praise, the usual nonsense. "Nancy, you've been a pillar of consistency. You're well-respected. We see you as someone who's weathered this storm with grace." I smiled politely. I'd heard similar words before, usually right before someone asked me to take on more work for no extra pay. But then he said, "We'd like to offer you a new role, Operations Compliance Lead, full-time, with a team." A pause. "Would you consider it?" Would I? I didn't answer right away. I reached into my bag and slid a flash drive across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Everything you didn't want to know," I said. "But everything you need to." He plugged it in. On screen appeared a folder titled "The Forgotten Work of the Invisible." Inside, documentation of every ignored email, every stolen report, every manipulated file. I hadn't just collected evidence on Emily. I had tracked the pattern. The pattern of dismissal, of exclusion, of ideas taken from assistants and admins, repackaged and paraded as brilliance by others higher up. Emily was just the symptom. The disease was deeper. The director sat back. He didn't say anything for a long time. "You kept all this?" I nodded. "I remember what people forget." He looked rattled. "Why are you giving this to me now?" "Because I'm not just interested in a promotion. I'm interested in change. And I wanted on record that this company allowed rot to grow under its nose, because no one listened to the quiet ones." He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Didn't flinch. After a long silence, he asked, "What do you want, Nancy?" And for the first time in 12 years, I told the truth. I want a seat at the table, not because I begged for it, because I earned it. And I want to make sure the next Nancy in this building doesn't have to become invisible just to survive. He nodded slowly. "We can do that." And they did. Within weeks, my title changed. My desk moved, next to the partner wing, not the printer. I had a team, a voice. I rewrote vendor protocols, designed a training program for admin staff, and led monthly integrity audits. People came to me now, not because they needed someone to clean up their mess, but because they finally realized I had seen everything all along. Emily? She never came back. Word spread quietly that she'd been blacklisted from similar firms. The consultant boyfriend disappeared. Her LinkedIn changed to freelancer. I didn't block her. I wanted her to see that the woman she called dull had become the one writing the rules. I never raised my voice, not once, but I raised the evidence, and that was loud enough. 6 months later, they invited me to speak at a leadership panel. Yes, me, Nancy Everett, the woman who once fetched coffee and printed meeting packets. Now sitting under bright lights between two executives who wouldn't have remembered my name a year ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. The topic was building ethical culture in the workplace. I didn't prepare a script. I didn't need one. My story was etched into every fiber of my being. The moderator turned to me and asked, "Nancy, from your experience, what's the most overlooked risk in corporate culture today?" I took a breath, looked at the crowd of suits and stilettos, and said, "Silencing the people who remember." A pause. In most companies, there are the leaders, the visionaries, the risk takers. And then there are the people who hold the actual history of the organization in their heads. Admins, assistants, clerks. The ones who don't speak often, but when they do, they usually say something that could save you $1 million or cost you your job. There were chuckles, then silence. I leaned forward. You want to reduce risk? Start listening to the people who've been watching quietly, because when they finally stop being quiet, it's usually too late. Afterward, 3 different managers approached me for advice on improving transparency. I smiled politely, gave generic suggestions, and walked away. Because the truth was, they didn't need advice. They needed accountability. Back at the office, I still kept the same desk chair, still used the same fountain pen I'd had for 10 years. Some things I didn't change because they reminded me of where I started, but the people around me? That changed. I had interns now. One of them, Maya, reminded me of myself. Quiet, methodical, sharp as glass beneath her gentle tone. One afternoon, she asked if she could speak to me privately. She looked nervous. "I think someone on the finance team is misreporting numbers," she said quietly. I didn't flinch. I smiled. "Show me." She did. I didn't handle it directly. I coached her through it, how to gather the data, document the pattern, escalate properly. And when the review concluded, she received a commendation from the audit department. Later, she asked me, "How did you know what to do so quickly?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Because I've seen what happens when you stay silent too long." One evening, I found myself alone in the office again. Old habits die hard. I walked past the glass-walled conference room where Emily used to hold her fake strategy sessions. Now it was a break room. Someone had put up a motivational poster. "Integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching." I almost laughed because someone is always watching. I stopped by the file room, my sanctuary in the early days, and opened a random drawer. Inside were forms from 5 years ago, dusty but intact. My initials were still in the bottom corner, of half of them, invisible back then. But now, those initials meant something. I don't know what happened to Emily after she left. I heard rumors, contract gigs, a failed startup, a LinkedIn post about career pivots. She never reached out, never apologized, and that's fine. Some people never learn. They just move on to the next stage, the next victim, the next empty title. They build their identities on stolen scaffolding until it collapses. I don't need closure from her. I got something better. I became the person they once thought I could never be. Not because I raised my voice, not because I demanded a spotlight, but because I made silence work for me, not against me. And now when people walk past my office, they don't say, "She's just the assistant." They say, "Ask Nancy, she'll know." And I always do.